In order to answer the question if Guts and Griffith are similar as humans, we need to examine the term of friendship. Aristotle deemed friendship to have three forms: friendship of pleasure, friendship of utility, and friendship of virtue. Only one of these is characterized by a sense where both people enjoy the human as they are in front of them, with all their might and weaknesses, ignoring all that surrounding buzz of potential shallow and brisk excitements or a need for help and pragmatic assistance. This final and highest form of companionship is the most valuable and thus called virtuous, because it is rare and more difficult to attain. Not everyone can reach that point of human experience, and surely not if you aren't trying your best in life to become the most resilient and successful being you could be. The friendship of virtue demands some prerequisites before it can be unlocked. It needs excellence of character. Aristotle was very expressive in his philosophy about the character of man and how it should be cultivated and honed like a piece of hot metal that gets colder and more crude once it starts to be neglected and ignored. For him, character had to be repeatedly developed and strengthened, most of all through good actions of habit that were difficult and worthy enough to pose a challenge and teach a lesson. Aristotle once said, "Excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny." It is never the case that a leader comes into position, has immense success, and retains the height of power for a long time when he doesn't have the competence, confidence, and courage to enact his will into the world. Griffith was not born in some pretentious family that fed him with a silver spoon. No, he was quite the opposite of all the nobles that he met along his path of ascension towards his goal of a castle. He was a mere street urchin when he first laid his eyes upon the beautiful fortress in the distance, where it seemed unachievable and distant. Day after day, the developing leader built his own band that became so formidable that everybody knew its name, the Band of the Hawk. But before we continue with Griffith, please consider subscribing and liking. Thank you. And it wasn't purely because Griffith won most of the battles by his own hand, but because he had the charisma to attract the best of fighters and warriors into his ranks, that finally found themselves in the company of like-minded people that eventually become family and friends. Thus it becomes a nomadic large group of humans that have quite literally grown with each other and have trusted each other for years upon years to guard each other's backs in times of danger. It takes an extraordinary mind to navigate so many individuals in a coherent manner, especially during periods of war, death and chaos. Griffith was not a stumbling child anymore and had the highest and most concentrated of intentions to make all this work, for his sake and for others. That is the point when the hawk meets the dog. Guts grew up in even harsher conditions, only characterized by blood and gore, the worst human existence can offer. He was taught from early on by tough men that the world is never going to offer mercy or anything on a platter, so you had to be as strong as you could be in order to grasp what you want and not let it slip away. Day after day, year after year, Guts trained his body to be resilient and strong, fast and agile. With that, his mind was iron and craved freedom that the physical could possibly offer. Guts opened new doors for himself that allowed him to step away from the horrors of his past and helpless despair and struggle, and to reach a destination of his own free will, which could present him with meaning. It was terrifying for anybody to face this monster of a boy that displayed such battle prowess, unseen for his age. Nothing but admiration could be expressed by those that fought alongside him, and nothing but despair was seen in the eyes of his enemies. That early dynamic meant power for Guts. He finally controlled despair and could direct it somewhere else. Good or evil. Guts' physicality and indomitable human spirit unlocked more choices he could take in the future than at any point before. Identity, freedom or meaning were all concepts that were profound and hard to understand, yet Guts had the luxury to pursue them with an excellent character and a better chance of success. So Hawk and Dog meet, both respectable in their own regard. A strong and intelligent person is not a slave to someone weak, or anyone at all, in that regard. Hence why a friendship with someone else would mean something deep, because all that is outer, unimportant and fake was forgotten by an excellent character. Guts and Griffith found solace in each other. The same how an individual can find peace in virtues such as patience, strength, wisdom, etc. This realization that there is someone similar to oneself is a huge relief in this harsh world. How is a friendship of virtue exactly characterized? True friends wish well for each other for the sake of the other, and not for some hidden benefit. It is a gesture of goodwill and recognition. And then there is a sense of equality and reciprocity where each member extracts out of and benefits into the friendship equally. Such relationships become really stable because of their solid foundation of virtue, which again offers people to rely on something other than themselves, consequently allowing them to reduce the burden of life to a certain degree. When Griffith looks over his shoulder on the battlefield and sees Guts, he needn't turn back again, because he possesses the strong belief that everything will be taken care of by a good and capable friend. That is the point when you give a sigh of relief. He is finally here. Guts is here. Griffith is here. Another philosopher that wrote about friendship, Michel de Montaigne, described how really good friendships are extremely hard to find, but how the two people tend to melt into one another and become doppelgangers. They are like two halves of the same soul and have almost a mystical connection to each other. Remember how Guts, in his search for personal meaning and destiny, was so deeply inspired by Griffith's vision that he decided to leave the Band of the Hawk. Guts had not been inspired in that way by anyone before. He sees it as an opportunity to truly be a friend of Griffith, who defines friends, as Aristotle himself does, to be independent and to have a strong goal and a dream for themselves. Conversely, Griffith's downfall was not caused by anyone else but Guts. No corrupt or evil politician could bring him out of his calculated coldness. Only Guts could. At the point of separation and disconnection is when stability is lost, even hyperbolically for the whole world, as it sets the events of causality, the Behelit and God hand, in motion. Ambition remained Griffith's strongest trait, as did Guts' sense for freedom, which in the end drastically divided them. Once the eclipse commenced, the eternal friendship of Guts and Griffith broke in two halves, turning the broken gem into bloodied shards that had transformed into bitter rivalry of what emerges to be a battle between the darkness of evil and the darkness of human existence. Both of them retain their characteristics, however they are more pronounced after the traumatic event and the birth of Femto. Griffith shows in the eclipse that his ambition and practical view of life are above all else, whilst Guts is pushed in stark chains that paradoxically offer a way towards freedom, as he absolutely and surely knows what he doesn't want to become, which he almost did in the manga, and what the fight must be against. Furthermore, Guts finds himself throughout the story where he essentially belongs to since birth: chaos. He was born on the battlefield in horror, and will remain on it until the end in the maximum realization of terror and struggle because of his sacrificial mark. At the same time, the controlling Griffith seeks to utilize his newfound powers to further his reach and grasp the lives of others like never before, admittedly, for not a bad purpose. In that way, they both find themselves in an yin and yang circles where one has to fight against darkness in the form of light, and the other has to create light out of darkness. Femto and Guts are sworn enemies at this point. That's where they start to grow apart from each other. Griffith is a heavy idealist that perceives life in a different form than it is. He sees something that others can't in front of their eyes. That's why evil is permissible in his case, or so he understands it. If the deepest abyss can be lit up by the brightest of suns, till the end of times in an expression of prosperity and tranquility, was evil in it really that unnecessary? On the other hand, Guts is a realist that lives in that conjured darkness and struggles with it. He is aware of the brutalities of life and is often cynical, so Guts tends to value tangible actions and personal integrity over grand ideals. Dissimilar to Griffith, he cannot oversee the deaths of his closest people as some part of a higher purpose. It is immoral and horrid. So what does their duality mean in the end? It is a tragedy in all aspects. At the same time, it is symbolic. Griffith symbolizes the flawed human desire for greatness and the corrupting influence of unchecked ambition. His transformation into Femto represents the ultimate corruption of his ideals. Guts symbolizes the indomitable human spirit, resilience, and the quest for personal freedom. His continuous struggle against overwhelming odds and his refusal to be dominated by fate highlight his enduring strength and willpower. From friends to enemies, in the most dramatic and mythological way possible.
Everywhere, man blames nature and fate. Yet his fate is mostly but the echo of his character and passion, his mistakes and